I put it in the folder. Okay, cool. And here they come.
Michelle, I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, I'm back.
Okay, well, it's 3 o'clock, and we want to get this meeting started. We want to thank everyone that's participating in this. It looks like so far we have 36 attendees that have logged in, so we thank you for participating. This is the neighborhood meeting for the proposed cell tower out at Yavapai Hills. The cities all we're doing is facilitating the meeting or hosting the meeting. We are not part of the application. This is not city property. So we just wanted to make sure that they give the applicants a chance to talk with you about the project and answer any questions. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a question and answer, and that's where you'll be able to put any questions that you have. And then after the presentations, we'll start going through those questions and start answering them. Please pay attention to the questions, because if there are repeats, we're going to skip them and say they've already been answered. So the chat has been disabled, just so you know, because we can't manage both. So I'm going to hand it over to the applicants, and we'll get started.
Thank you. My name is Michelle Lamoureux, and I am with Pinnacle Consulting. We are representing Sun State Towers as well as Verizon for this new proposed wireless facility. This neighborhood meeting, we do want to thank the City of Prescott for putting it together, especially during this time. I know it's difficult to make sure that everybody's needs and questions are answered and met. So we do appreciate that, and we thank you all for making the time to attend. One of the things when we do initially look for a site is obviously we try to find something that is the least intrusive to the area and neighborhood given what the needs of the network are. So that's kind of how we came about the location of this site, since there is existing utilities there, the water tower, there's also a weather service tower there currently, and some other infrastructure that we felt that since the neighborhood did have a need, that putting up a stealth facility in this area would meet the needs of the network. So with that being said, this is a proposed 50-foot mono communication facility. And that's the top of the tower. It's 55 feet to the top of branches. We will be putting up a 8-foot CMU wall around the equipment. So essentially the only thing that will be seen from the outside, if you were to go onto the property, would be the mono elm and the CMU wall. Everything will be contained within that compound. This is a multi-carrier facility, so multiple carriers can locate on this one elm. This is just an overview of the area and where we are proposing to put the facility, approximately where that star is. Obviously, the star is much larger than the area. This is just a architectural rendering of it, not what it will actually look like. Again, as I said, it's 50 feet to the top of the tower with 5 feet of branches above it. It is a 3-sector array with 2 antennas per sector, an 8-foot CMU wall, and it is co-locatable. This is proposing to fill a significant gap in coverage. Well, actually, it's a capacity problem within the network. So this has been designed to be the least intrusive means to solve that coverage and capacity problem. And again, it can accommodate additional carriers. So as I'm sure during this pandemic, you've all experienced that wireless services are no longer a luxury, but a necessity. One of the things was, who benefits from this? Well, lots of people benefit from this. Emergency services, you know, the FCC now estimates that 80% of 911 calls are placed from cell phones. First responders, we did actually reach out to fire and police in the area, and both of them have stated that there is a need in the area, and they are both in support of this. So everybody benefits from increased and better coverage. And like I said, City of Prescott Police and Fire both are in support. We spoke to the fire chief and the police chief. So they both really would like to see better coverage in the area. So it's not just, you know, when Verizon looks at the area, it's not just because they want to, you know, put up a new tower. There are reasons behind it. That is the end of my presentation. Oh, and just so everybody on the call is aware, we also did meet with the Yavapai Hills HOA to let them know that this was being considered, and we met with their board and did a presentation for them as well, so that you know, it wasn't a shock to when we were doing the neighborhood meetings. So there has been some previous neighborhood outreach prior to this neighborhood meeting. With that, I'm going to pull up the RF report and let Steve Kennedy, who's a third-party RF consultant. Can you see my, is the RF, is that up?
Yeah, it's up.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Go ahead and pay to next page. Okay, my name is Steve Kennedy. I'm an RF engineer. I've been in wireless engineering industry for approximately 32 years, designed and modified thousands of sites across the United States, as well as worked in the satellite area. I reside out of Litchfield Park. So this proposed site, as Michelle stated, a 55-foot mono elm with appurtenances because of the limbs. And this is a location. The anchor tenant is going to be Verizon. Verizon's antenna center line, or the middle of the antenna, is going to be at 46 feet above ground. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's the objective? Why does Verizon need a site here? Well, it's twofold. As Michelle talked about, its capacity. So the more users that utilize the area, as in the customers that Verizon have that work, and the more usage from the mobiles, the handsets going on, that causes utilization to go up on sectors. And an RF channel is a shared resource, and it's a very finite resource. So wireless carriers have to design sites to adapt to the area and to adapt to the customers. Because this is a shared resource and it's a finite resource, they have to add more sites to the network to add additional capacity. So if you think of capacity as, let's imagine it's a water hose. If one person's drinking from the water hose, they get the full capacity of the site. If another person comes in, half the water goes to one person, the other half goes to the other person, the capacity is split, and so on and so forth. As you keep adding subscribers, that amount of water reduces per user to where the users are getting not very much water out of the same pipe. It's the same concept. Well, the sites that cover this area, which is the Arizona 2 Prescott Valley link site, which I'll show a map here in a moment to what that means, it's overloaded. It was about 95% overloaded before COVID, and now it's significantly overloaded because many of the users are working from home now. So I'll show that what that means. So everybody's drinking from the same water hose, and there's not a lot of water for each person. So that, as well as the Highway 69 traffic and the suburban areas, that's the need for the capacity. So it's really user or Verizon user generated. That's why the capacity is going up, is because there's a lot of users within the area. Second part of that's going to be coverage. Reading through some of the letters, one person stated that they wanted more service up on the north side of the subdivision. They aren't getting enough service. So we're going to see an increase in in-building coverage. That's going to be helped because the transmitter is going to be closer to the users, so you'll get a whole lot better link budget. And then because the demands per user have increased, the call quality is going to decrease unless a site gets put in place. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we see kind of an overview map. The area around, if you look up in the upper right corner, you'll see a blue pin. That's an existing Verizon site. If you look in the upper left corner, that's another existing Verizon site. You look in the lower left corner, that's another existing Verizon site. And then just south of where the new proposed site is, that's another existing site. So there are sites covering the area, and the users on the Zoom meeting that have Verizon service, you know what your service is like better than anyone else back in this area. So the new site Yavapai, the site that's actually getting the most capacity increased is this AZ2 Prescott Valley Link site. So the sectors that face to the north, east, and northwest and north, they're the ones that are getting over capacity significantly, and that's the need for this AZ2 Yavapai site. So typically Verizon or any carrier does about a three-year forecast on utilization. So they look at what's going on now in a network, and in 3 years, granted a certain amount of growth per year by subscribers and by utilization, they're going to forecast, oh, in these areas we're going to start to get overloaded. We need to do some things. We need to add carriers, we need to add cell splits, things of that nature. That's essentially what happened about 2.5, 3 years ago. This site showed that it was going to become overloaded, and it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So a design was made and a searching was issued to try and go find a site to cover this area and these subscribers, hence the AZ2 Yavapai searching. So it's user driven, it's demand driven by the existing subscribers within the Verizon network. Next slide, please. So if we look a little bit, this is the same site, so we can see how the antennas point and what they're trying to do. And you can look down at the AZ2 Prescott Valley Link down in the south side and look at that the antennas point northwest and northeast. And those are the two sectors that are overloading. So there's coverage on the highway, but there's also some tools that Verizon has where it shows where the subscribers are getting the not as good a service as what it is as they should be getting. And that's where a lot of these subscribers in the suburban area up in Yavapai Hills, that's where there's a lot of subscribers, and the detailed data that's coming back from the phones. The phones themselves report what they're doing and what they're seeing from the network. There's a lot of issues, a lot of lower bandwidth, a lot of received signal strength issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is Root Metrics. This is a third-party company that what they do is they check coverage for and capacity for what all the wireless carriers and subscribers. So they have these vans that they drive around and they take readings, and they do this approximately once every 6 months within each network. So Root Metrics is showing where every time you see a cell and you see a color on it, that's where they've driven. That's where the van's gone through and taken a look and taken readings. So the coverage is showing is okay, which up on the north side of the Yavapai Hills area, probably not as good because they're not getting back there, but they're showing reasonable coverage in the area. If we go to the next slide, go down.
Sorry.
There you go, throughput. So now we show throughput. So we talked about, remember, everybody's drinking from the same water hose. As we start to see that we see slow throughput, moderate throughput, and fast throughput, the yellow, but we're seeing a lot more red throughput to the point of when they were driving around, they weren't getting very many good sets of throughput anyway, so they were only reporting a few times, and when they did report, it wasn't very good. So that's another reason that hence the capacity need. The capacity the users are really utilizing the throughput, so there's not a lot of spare capacity for any other users. Next slide, please. This is another application. This is called goodness, it's an application you load on your phone, and it's done with third party. It's called Open Signal. So they have a little engine that I think is on, if you have loaded Facebook, the Facebook app or certain apps on your phones, these third party apps add information and send it to these third party servers and report what's being seen within the area. And you can see that a lot of the users within this area aren't reporting a lot of information, and it's not doing a lot of help for capacity. And then the users that are up here on the north side, they're not getting very good service at all. So you can start to see that there's not a lot of reporting going on because the links being made aren't that strong. Next slide, please. So we can also see another thing that impacts how a site works is terrain. Now let's say we go to the northeast there and we get up on that very high hill. Well, while that's great, it's going to cover a lot of distance. all of the users within the surrounding area are going to climb onto that tower, and there's going to be no capacity left. You're going to get no throughput. So when wireless carriers look, it's low cells, it's low power, multiple reuse cells. A cell has a specific coverage area, and terrain impacts it. Just like you can't see over the hill, the antennas can't see over the hill either. They're limited by the same physics that our eyes are limited by. So you can look at the AZ2 Prescott Valley link down south. It's by the mall, and you can show that it's not doing a whole lot of service, and where the service falls up in the suburban areas up around the new AZ2 Yavapai site is planned and proposed. Go to the next slide. Okay, so we can look at terrain profiles. There's a lot of terrain impact. We can see how the profile going between the Yavapai site and the Highway 69. There's just a lot of things to have to overcome to try to provide service. And once again, hills block wireless coverage. Next slide. It's another terrain profile going southeast. We can see a significant drop, so that where that AZ2 Prescott Valley site is, it's not able to see up into where the new site is and go over that hill and serve those users that are up north. Go to the next slide. And then we have the terrain profile down towards Frontier Village from the southwest. It's not able to reach over and cover the users like they need to be within the AZ2 Yavapai proposed site area. We go to the next slide, and then once again from the west, from Prescott Highway, same thing, a lot of terrain and impact going down. So once again, if you build a site and you put it up on a really big hill, that's great. It's going to cover a really far area, but there's not going to be very much capacity. There's not going to be able to handle all of the calls and all of the data sessions and streaming video going on at the same time. I call that kind of like the Thanksgiving effect. So everybody has Wi-Fi at home. It's you and your significant other. You can walk around the house. You have decent signal level. You can stream video, whatever you want to do, watch Netflix, it's fine. But when Thanksgiving rolls around, the whole family shows up, everybody wants your Wi-Fi password. All of a sudden things start slowing down. Netflix buffers, you can't download the websites as fast because that radio channel on that Wi-Fi access point is shared. Now there's a lot more users on that channel, so they don't have as much bandwidth. Same thing happens within the wireless network, except it's all of the users that are on the phones traveling through the area and being utilized at the houses and at the malls and in the cars and wherever they are. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is called current RSRP current coverage. So this is what is going on within the area existing. Green means service inside buildings. Yellow means service inside cars. And red means service outdoors, open field, on the sidewalk, things of that nature. So that's what this slide means. So everywhere you see green, you can have service within the house or a building to 95% probability. For yellow, it's in your vehicle because your vehicle's got windows. The RF can travel through the windows better than it can a wall of a house. So it's a little bit better. And in open field, you don't have anything. You're not inside a house. You're not inside a car. You're outside. You have a little bit better chance. So that's what's going on with the current coverage. And we can see where the new Yavapai site is up to the northeast. There's not a lot of service in that area. It's pretty bad. And it's also spotty within the area that's close to the site because the other sites cannot provide the level of service. We go to the next slide. We see the additional service being provided by the new site. Is it going to get everywhere? Not completely, because terrain becomes an impact, but we want to put the users or put the site where the users are. And what I mean by that is, for those of you that have Wi-Fi at home, you have a Wi-Fi access point. When you bought internet service and put your Wi-Fi in, you didn't put it 3 doors down at your neighbor's house and say, hey, I want to use that service. You put the Wi-Fi access point or the router in your house for you, and it services you because that's where you are. It's the same concept with the cell sites. Put the cell sites where the subscribers are. And the subscribers are here. This is what they need covered, and this is where they're being utilized. This is where the capacity is happening. Next slide. So this is a best server slide. So basically is, what's the probability that a set of antennas is going to cover a specific area? And each site, you can see by color what it's doing. If you look over in the area for Yavapai Hills and the area surrounding where the proposed site is, there's a lot of different colors there. There's no real dominant one site that's covering that area. It's a mix, so you could be bouncing from site to site to site. You're not sure. Because of that, you're farther away from it. It doesn't hear you as well. The phone has to power up. the battery life is not as good. It gets a little warmer whenever you're on the phone call. You'll notice it gets warm a little faster than when you're close to a cell site. The next slide, please. Now we see that, okay, well, this new site's going to provide a lot of the signal, and there's going to be a good, strong, dominant server that's covering these areas. That's what a best server plot does. Next slide. Or was that the last one? Okay, I think that was the last one. Okay, so a couple other things. There were some questions about RF safety or RF exposure. Some things to remember that is every licensed transmitter in the United States is governed or regulated by the Federal Communications Commission, which means we have to follow rules and regulations about RF emissions and RF safety. That's called OET 65. It's a bulletin that was created many years ago and provided a lot of working groups within many governments across the world, and many administrations, many doctors got involved, the World Health Organization, Cancer Society, the FDA, everybody got involved and helped come up with these standards. And these standards there's two limits. There's the general public limit, and then there's the worker limit. So the worker limit's like if you work on top of a 3-story building and there's an air conditioner and your air conditioner doesn't understand radio energy, there's occupational safety that's put in place. There might be barriers and signage and things like that to say, hey, don't get too close to these antennas. But for general public, you don't know you're walking by a site. You don't know what you're doing around. It's very, very, very conservative. Like they found the number and then they went conservative like 50 times more to limit the amount of RF energy there is. And once again, RF energy is not bad. It's just there's two types of energy. There's ionizing and non-ionizing. Ionizing is X-rays or gamma rays, things like that. So when you go to the dentist, you have to cover yourself in the lead cover when you're getting your X-ray. That's because that's ionizing energy. That's sending photons through your body. Photons have the ability to change your DNA. On the other side of that is non-ionizing. That's just energy that gets warm. So you ever notice you stay on your phone a long time and talk, your phone gets warm. Or you turn a light bulb on, and then you turn it off and you touch the light bulb's warm because it's generating the light and it's generating heat. Same thing with an amplifier in a radio. It's generating the RF wave, the radio wave, and it's generating heat. So the FCC with OET 65, all wireless carriers are regulated to make sure they meet this requirement and they stay within the boundaries of what's been generated as safe. So then safe is 50 times less than what was actually considered safe. It's 50 times smaller than that. So it's very, very, very conservative. And then with regards to questions about 5G, there's not going to be 5G on this tower. There's two types of 5G to think about. One is millimeter wave, 28 gigahertz, 39 gigahertz, very, very high frequencies. That's for small cells in like downtown areas, downtown Phoenix, things of that. Site's very small. It may cover a block at most. So it's a very high density area. That's a 5G millimeter wave. The other type of 5G is where they take the existing frequency band, kind of like what T-Mobile's been talking about. They have 5G all over the United States. What they did was they put 5G technology on their existing spectrum. Just like when the networks went from 3G to 4G, now they're going to 4G to 5G. They're utilizing the same spectrum. So there's two types of 5G, the upper millimeter wave and then the lower existing spectrum that's been in use for years. So those are the two things to keep in mind. And this site will not have any millimeter wave 5G. And there were some health studies referenced in a few of the letters. That was everything. I read through those reports, and it was 6 gigs and above. And that frequency band or above that frequency band is not going to be utilized on this site. That's it for me.
So we did do some photo sims of what it is going to look like, and I did want to show them. So this is looking south. The yellow pins in the upper corner there show where these photo sims are. I know that, like I said, there are existing facilities out here. There's the water tank, which the water tank is approximately 33 feet tall. And then there is a an outbuilding out here, and there's also a, right here is the weather service. They also have a tower on this property as well. So this is about 225 feet from the site, looking northeast. As you can see, there are other, trees in the area, which is why we proposed this design. We did want it to try to blend in with the surrounding area. In addition to the mono elm, which is the only elm slash kind of looks a little bit like a pine tree. This is the actual only elm that's indigenous to Arizona. And Larson Camouflage, who is actually based out of Tucson, is who designed and developed this particular camouflage tree. And they did it specifically for Arizona. So in my humble opinion, it looks a lot better than a lot of the toilet brush and or pine trees that have been utilized in the past. This does provide a little bit more density of branches and leaves, so it does look more realistic and will blend in more with the surrounding area. This is approximately 225 feet looking north. So again, I know that, the aesthetics was the concern for some folks, some letters. I am willing, because I do understand that we are going in a residential area. So, if you have a concern of what it's going to look like from your property, and you're not in one of these vantage points, we are certainly willing to send somebody out there to take some photos and do additional photo sims for you. So, you certainly can reach out to us and let us know if that's something that you would like us to do. So with that, Tammy, if you'd like, we can certainly take some questions.
Okay, well, we'll start with the first one. Did they ever consider putting antenna on top of Glassford Hill? That's much higher and would provide better circular coverage, assuming there's infrastructure up there.
So I can take that. So Glassford Hill is about 2.39 miles northeast of the existing area where the proposed site is. And remember, I talked about everybody sharing the same channel. The cell sites cover what they cover. So if we go back and we look at the coverage area, go back up 2 slides. There we go. Oops, go back one more. So if we go to Glassford Hill, there's already sites in between here and there. So if the site goes up to Glassford Hill, which is a little bit off this map, it's going to provide service that's going to be very large, very encompassing. And remember, this is low-powered, multiple reuse sites. So if we have one, what we call boomer, sending a lot of RF energy out, what it's going to do is all the mobiles are going to see that one site, they're going to attach to that one site, and nobody's going to have any capacity. Hence the reason why we put sites down as they move, and as the traffic changes, and the sites are built around where the traffic is. A mentor of mine which taught me 25 years ago, put the site where the subscribers are. Once again, it's like getting a Wi-Fi router and internet service for your house, and instead of putting it in your house, you put it in your neighbor's house 4 or 5 doors down. It's not going to provide the level of service you. You put it up on the 2nd story, then everybody's going to see that Wi-Fi router, but they're not going to be able to get a lot of capacity or a lot of throughput to that connection. So if we look at going to Glassford Hill, all we're doing is making making a site that's just a noisemaker. It's not. It's going to actually lower the capacity for the area because it's very loud. It's going to lower the capacity.
Okay. Will the other tower be removed and consolidated with this tower? Which I believe is the weather station one.
Oh,
that's the tower.
Yes, we have actually reached out to the Weather Service to ask them if they would like to locate on our tower, or move their site within the compound, um, just so that there's not so much clutter up there. And we have not received an answer back from them yet.
Okay. What frequency would this transmit received at?
Okay, so there's, if I can remember all the bands correctly, so it's going to be at the 2100 megahertz frequency is one channel's transmit, and 1700 megahertz is that received. So that's the first channel. The second channel is in the 1950 megahertz. That's the PCS band. The first channel I referred to was what was called the AWS band. So there's two channels. The third channel is going to be in the 700 megahertz range. That's the third channel. The fourth channel is going to be in the 850 megahertz range. That's pretty much the capacity of the site. That's the channel allocation. So the higher the frequency, actually the smaller area of coverage, because the higher you go in frequency, the smaller the area. Like I talked about earlier, where we had the 28 and 39 gigahertz 5G, they're very small, very like a block. So the lower the frequency, the farther it travels. The higher the frequency, the closer in it travels. It doesn't go as far.
Cool. If you are not a Verizon subscriber, will this tower benefit other cell carrier subscribers?
No, you would have to be a Verizon user to get benefit from this site, unless other carriers locate on this tower. And as Michelle talked about earlier, it is multiple tenants or multiple operators could locate on this tower if they choose. If they do, an AT&T user or a T-Mobile user would gain benefit if their antennas were added to the tower as well.
So Verizon is currently the anchor tenant. They are the ones that are interested currently. And we are in talks with T-Mobile. If this tower doesn't go through, T-Mobile also is looking at it.
Let's see. I lost my question. What did I do? Oh, okay. Will there be revenue for Yavapai Hills? And I don't think we can answer that question. And is there any possibility of this ever being upgraded to 5G?
So when we go back and we talk about, I brought up earlier, there's two types of 5G. So 5G is a technology. It can go on any frequency band. Just like 4G is a technology that can go on any frequency band. Same thing with 3G and all the way down back to where we had car phones in the trunks of our cars, and it was 1G, first generation. So 5G can happen. Like T-Mobile right now is talking about 5G on their commercials. They have it active and live on their low band spectrum. That's their 600 megahertz and 700 megahertz spectrum. Verizon could do that and overlay it on the existing structure. So 5G could go on, but it would be in a current band that's already being utilized within the area. If you look at the site surrounding where the proposed site is, they're already using this band. They're just using it as 4G. So it would just be a technology change and an upgrade to add it to the same spectrum. And remember, 5G, the millimeter wave, which is the very high frequency, 28 gigahertz, 39 gigahertz, and it only goes a block or two, it's not functional in this area because it's only going to go a block or two, and this is a more suburban type area, more rural type area. So the sites need to cover more than a block.
So I think that what is most concerning to people is probably the 5G millimeter waves that are being put in downtown areas, is what I would guess. Would you not agree, Steve?
Yes, ma'am, I would. That's where more of the conversation is in the higher frequency band.
Right. Which this site is not going to have that.
No, ma'am, it will not. It is not conducive to utilize that higher frequency band within this area. The site needs to cover more than one square block.
Right. I just want to clarify that for everybody out there. So.
Thank you.
I think we already talked about, you showed why not place it at the mall. I believe that you said there was already one there at the mall, and it's not sufficient right now.
Yeah. Right now, there's one at the mall, and once again, it's providing a decent level of service. It's highly utilized. It's going beyond 100% utilization right now. But as we can see, moving towards the north, it's not providing the same level of service, nor it can't because of the terrain and the impact. So that's why the site was proposed to the north of it within this area to provide service and offload those sectors and help those users up in the northern area that are utilizing the site and driving it beyond its capacity capabilities.
So the next one is talking about the, given the RF danger, basically what protection is planned for people in proximity to the site.
Okay, so once again, we go back to what was called OET 65. That's the bulletin that all licensed wireless carriers utilize it's called maximum permissible exposure, electromagnetic safety, or RF safety. So these sites are looked at on an annual basis and reran and evaluated to make sure that they're within compliance. And then every 3 years, there's readings taken on the ground at the site. To give you an idea, RF levels, it's proximity based. So let's say I'm 1 foot away from the antenna and I move to 2 feet away from antennas. When I do that, I cut the power by 75%. Or if I move from 2 feet to 4 feet away from the antenna, I cut the power by another 75%. So it continues to cut as I double my distance away from the site. So to give you an idea, this site's going to be generating probably about 1.2 to 1.5 of the general public limit, which is a very small amount on the ground beneath the site. The amount of energy at the front of the antenna, 1 inch away from the front of the antenna, compared to what's down on the ground below that antenna is 1/1000. It's very, very small. The amount of energy is tiny. It's fractional from what's going on in the ground. So the farther distance you get away, every time you double the distance, it drops by 75%. It gets smaller and smaller and smaller the farther away from the site. So the safety generation is, once again, all licensed wireless carriers have to follow FCC regulation. The FCC guidelines and regulations are set in Bulletin OET 65, and that's what we have to follow, and it's done on an annual basis. Anytime a change happens on the site, there's a different antenna added or changed, or a carrier's added or power's adjusted, this site has to, or that change causes the site to be reevaluated and make sure it still falls within compliance within what OET 65 gives us, which was basically what everybody legally has to run by.
Okay, so the next couple questions are from Chuck Valbor, from Chuck. And he has raised his hand to speak. So what I'll do is I'll just allow him to come on to talk and ask his questions because he has a few of them.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, Chuck, we have you on. Well,
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, well, Steve's doing a good job. He's quite experienced, but unfortunately, because of his business environment, he can't be entirely truthful with us. I mean, the FCC standards for safety are very antiquated and totally inadequate for safety. But yeah, we won't get into that now, although what I'd really like to ask, since I did ask a lot of questions here that I typed in, maybe I got carried away, so I'll try to really contain it with a more pertinent one. You seem to be talking about some contradictory things here. Glassford Hill, you call a boomer. Well, we're just about as high as Glassford Hill. We've got great line of sight, 360 degrees. It's not a very efficient location for a cell tower. Overall network capacity is not enhanced by putting more boomers up. Why are you not looking at lower elevation alternatives instead? I mean, that's a typical cell network practice. You've got to allow the signal to die out and get more frequency reuse. You're not going to get good frequency reuse from up here on Bar Circle A. So I mean, why aren't you looking at better alternatives to this?
So the site wants, we want the site to help not only subscribers to the north of what the existing proposed or the proposed site is, which is in the upper mid area, but we also want it to help to the south and bridge the coverage on the south side and offload the site to the south. And its frequency reuse is a little different now than what it was 10 or 15 years ago. When the networks were more analog based or had different channels, there was frequency reuse issues. What's going on now is they all use a technology called long-term evolution, LTE. You might see that on the top of your phone in the upper right of the screen where you see 4G and you'll see LTE. Everybody's on the same channel. So because everybody's on the same channel, we don't have the reuse issues. What comes into play is trying to put the sites where the users are, not farther away from the users, but right in the middle of the users, and try to help them. And that makes the capacity work better. It's more efficient because the mobiles don't have to power up as high. And so they're not as loud to the adjacent users, and there's more capacity because everybody is using less power. There's more power to share with more users.
Well, to some extent, that's a good argument, but yeah, you're using OFDMA technology now, so it's not strictly frequency reuse, but in the end, the real increase in capacity comes from having cell sites that cover less area and having more cell sites. So I still think you're putting a boomer up here, and you haven't got a good argument. You really don't. This thing's going to have way too much coverage, and it is not going to be good for the neighborhood at all. It's going to cause interference to other services like police and fire, which are co-located. Co-site interference is a big deal, and it's not easily hand-waved away saying, oh, we'll just follow FCC regulations. There's big problems all over the country with that. I mean, if you're really concerned about health and safety, you won't put it next to the fire and police radios that are located at the same site.
Okay, so next question is about property values. Why not place it across the highway at the mall? There's everyone there. I understand Gacy is going to have a regular income from this tower. It is on his property. Yavapai Hills will receive no income. So I guess the question is about property values. Have you guys found any information about that?
Yeah, so one of my slides on here. So, you know, you can argue this both ways, obviously. You know, wires facilities increase property values for some people. You know, some people look at it as a detriment. You know, more than 75% of prospective home buyers say that cellular connection is important to them. You know, a lot of people, the first thing that they do when they walk into a house is they take pictures of the house and they're sending it to, you know, if they are interested in purchasing it, and they're sending it to their friends and family that they're going to buy it. Well, if they don't have cell service, you know, that is a deterrent for people. In this day and age, a very large percentage, 70% of people no longer have landlines. They only have cellular service. So not having good cellular service in your home is a very big deal, particularly now that so many of us aren't leaving our homes. We are working, playing, doing everything from our homes. So what I have noticed even more is how important cellular connection in our homes are. We are currently rolling out, and at Pinnacle, we don't just work for Verizon, we work for all of the carriers. And one of the things that we have noticed is we are rolling out into neighborhoods temporary sites more and more during this pandemic, so that people have better wireless connection for their cell phones. So as far as property values are concerned, having a strong wireless connection is actually, for a lot of people, actually increases your home value, or it does not decrease it. You know, millennials say that 83% of millennials say that a strong wireless connection is important to them, and they wouldn't purchase a home that didn't have that. So it's just, you know, you can argue that point both ways. It's essentially what people are looking for. I think that the most important thing to remember here is that, you know, 83% of 911 calls are made from a cell phone. So even within households that have landlines, when people are panicking and need to call 911, the studies have shown that even if they have a landline, they're reaching for their cell phone.
Okay. The question is, don't we already have cell towers at La Quinta Hotel? You didn't mention that area.
Yes, there already are a few towers at La Quinta Hotel, but that does not provide the capacity offload in there since they're existing structures, and we need to add more capacity to the network. We need to add another site that's closer to where the subscribers are that are showing the need for the capacity help.
Okay. For the current covered phones in Yavapai Hills that have good coverage and the tower is for the outer area, will we experience better service as well or not be affected?
When you speak to outer areas, Michelle, can you go back to the slide that shows the sites and the coverage? Go for the future coverage. So proposed, if you flip back and forth between that slide just once or twice and show the difference. So these are the areas where you see the green, yellow, and red increase. Those are the areas you're going to see some help from this site. So it's going to help some of the outer areas, one, by providing some service where there is no service currently. Two, because of the amount of offload that this site's going to produce, because it's got to offload the site to the south of it, and it will provide offload to the site to the east and west. It's going to help increase the throughput or the data capability or customer handling capability of the site surrounding it. So because this site is in the middle of the area and pointing within the suburban area, it's going to help that area mostly, but there will be some added benefits to the site surrounding, which should help make the service better.
Okay. Does the EF emission get distributed equally in all directions from the tower?
So go back to the next slide, Michelle. There we go. Okay, so when we model these, each antenna has a view. It's a 65-degree beam antenna. It sees that wide. There is some energy that goes off farther than that. So if you imagine a triangle, each side's 120 degrees. That's kind of what these antennas act like, is they look into a specific area. But as far as some areas being stronger than others, it's going to be a little stronger the direction the antennas are facing, but it's still within the FCC's OET 65 bulletin. And what it does, as the farther away you get, you double your distance, reduce your power significantly. So if you're 10 feet away from the front of the antenna and 200 feet away from the front of the antenna, it's much different the amount of energy that's going out. Within the FCC's limit for general public, cell sites typically generate about 1% of that limit. The biggest thing that generates that limit is going to be your phone. So if you have your phone next to you, this is generating 50% of that general public limit for power because it's close to you. Versus the cell site, it's farther away distance-wise, it's doing maybe 1%. So there's not one particular area that's worse than the other. The amount of energy is so small the farther away you get from the site, and even on the ground next to the site, it's tiny compared to what's like right up in front of the antenna 2 inches away.
Okay. So there's been a lot of questions about the possibility of it falling. I know that most of the cell towers are engineered to collapse on themselves, but people have seen pictures that they've fallen just straight down, and could possibly maybe touch the adjacent property. Can you talk a little about how those are engineered?
So, I mean, all towers are engineered, you know, to the specifications of the code. So I believe that the town of Prescott is a G, which it's 115 mile per hour wind bursts currently. So the reality of it is that at that wind speed, your house is probably going to go before this tower because your house isn't engineered to that. However, this is set back from the property lines 1-to-1. You know, what we can engineer is to have, you know, a break point where it would not necessarily collapse on itself, but what it does is it falls within a certain area. Which this is a 55-foot tower, we could engineer it so that if it fell over, it would collapse at a certain point, and it would collapse, you know, over within, you know, 25 feet. You know, whatever the halfway point is, you can engineer them that way. But towers are engineered to the standards of the code. So.
Okay. When do we anticipate the new tower will go active?
It just depends on essentially, obviously with COVID-19, things have slowed down. So towers not only have to go through the local zoning, you know, our hearings with the town of Prescott, but we do also have to go through federal regulations as well. And those are considerably backed up due to COVID-19. So I would not anticipate this going on air for at least another year.
What other sites were studied to cover this area?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
What other sites were studied to cover this area?
You mean like what candidates were brought forward, or?
Yeah, were there any other locations looked at besides this location?
So the way that it works is that RF identifies an area that has a need. And then, and this area has a need due to the nature of the and the area that they identify is not large. So, do you know exactly how large the search ring was for this area, Steve?
If I remember, the engineer, that was one of Scott's sites, his search rings in the Prescott area were typically a 16th or an 8th mile in diameter. It was more like he was giving you intersections to target than a large area because because of the terrain and the impact of the other sites. He had to be very careful where he placed them. So I would venture to say that it was less than a quarter mile, probably.
So what he was looking at, and obviously this is a residential area. So in this area, this was the only area that wasn't somebody's house, essentially. You know, unfortunately, you know, like Steve has explained, you do go where the users are. Well, the users that were in this residential area, and this is the only area, this is the only parcel or the only area in this search ring that wasn't essentially somebody's house.
Okay, and we have a Robert Halleck. He actually had his hand up to speak, and so I'll bring him in.
Okay.
Hi, Robert, we have you. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. I appreciate all the information. The question relates to the OET 65 guidelines, which have been repeatedly called on here to emphasize the safety. As a previous speaker has said, those guidelines are pretty out of date. And in fact, a number of European countries consider those guidelines way too high and have adopted much more stringent guidelines on cell towers and cell tower electromagnetic interference in the sense of possible damage to people. And so the idea that, yes, we're following guidelines and we're only at some percentage of the guidelines is true, but the guidelines themselves are really not appropriate for people. And there's been a serious study in Brazil. I'm not exactly sure what frequency it was, but it showed that if you live within 500 meters of a cell tower, your incidence of developing certain kinds of cancers goes up the closer you get to the tower. And so I think before this tower is approved, it's essential that someone take a very careful look at the potential health effects that would accrue to the people who live within 500 meters of this tower.
So to go back to the OET 65, the FCC asked for public comment. They were rewriting OET 65. I think the public comment started about, I want to say about a year ago. And there was a lot of work being done with updated models, updated data, looking at what was going on with the new frequency bands coming out. They wanted to see the impact for 5G. There was a lot of calls for that. So they went back through with a bunch of scientists from the National Institute of Health, OSHA, various other agencies in the United States, besides just the FCC, a bunch of MDs looking at all this. And they reviewed OET 65 and basically came back after all of this study for approximately a year and a half of all the latest modeling data. And they kept OET 65 at the same levels that they are now. So that was done within the last year and a half.
I'm aware that there's a small town in Western Massachusetts that has explored precisely the kind of question that's being addressed here about whether cell towers ought to be in residential areas. And that town adopted a new regulation that says no cell tower may be within 2,000 feet of a public way or a residential area. And so I remain concerned that for people who live close to the cell tower, there could be long-term damage. I recognize that cell tower communication is critical and lots of people find it essential for various reasons, but one does need to balance health potential risk against the potential gain.
I can just restate that we follow the standard. The standard has been reevaluated. And these carriers take this, it's very, very important. They spend a lot of money annually to reevaluate and make sure that we are in compliance with the standard set forth by the federal
Standard
government.
is wrong. It's just, well, whatever.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So the next question is, with all the negative publicity across the country putting cell towers in residential areas, why would you not apply for a commercial location? I think you kind of show why the commercial corridor doesn't have any other locations to service this area, correct?
So once again, we go back to where the users are and the ones that are generating the need, the customers that are within the area. This site's to offload these two sectors of the site south of it. And, you know, if we build another site right next to the site, it's not really going to help anybody. It's actually going to become a hindrance. So it's better to put the site, once again, where the users are that are generating the need. And the need is the suburban area to the north and the area surrounding it to help offload the site to the south. Putting it farther west or up closer to the other neighbor sites around it along the corridor is not going to help the capacity within this general area.
Okay. We have Jeanette Levy. She's a real estate agent that has wanted to talk. So Jeanette, I have you on.
And just before she does, normally we go an hour, which we have. We'll go, you know, maybe another 10 or 15 minutes, but just let everybody know.
Well, we understood it was for 2 hours, Tammy. This
This
is
is
Rory.
Rory Levy. I'm Jeanette's wife, our husband.
Okay, but so, hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we
Yes.
sure can.
Okay, so I just want to mention a couple of things because you mentioned real estate and real estate values. And I'm a real estate agent in New York City. I'm part of the largest privately owned real estate firm in the tri-state area here. I've been doing this for 13 years. So I think I know a little something about house values and just want to give some input. We own 3316 Yavapai Road, 3316 Bar Circle A Road. The only reason we haven't moved into it yet is because of COVID and we couldn't put our house on the market here in New York. Okay, so as far as house values, it absolutely 100% has to do with, as you may have heard, location, location, location. Now, here in New York City, there are certain things that are considered undesirable. Homeless shelters and all kinds of utilities and all kinds of other things. Yavapai Hills and why we bought there, the whole philosophy behind it is that it's an extremely natural, undisturbed environment with all the natural flora and fauna and wildlife and all of that. So I can tell you that a 55-foot tower is the equivalent of a 6-story building. Now, we have one family houses here, one floor. So 5, 6 stories or the ability to go up to the equivalent of 8 or 9 stories, that's not context and that's not the philosophy of Yavapai Hills. You mentioned millennials, and as the parent of 2, I can tell you that if there's anything that characterizes millennials, it's not having what they're told rammed down their throat. Yes, they're very tech savvy and they're very independent and they're very wary of authority. I can tell you that here in New York City, after 9/11, we were told it's safe, the air is safe, everything is safe. Do you know how many people are dying of cancers and other illnesses related to it? It's astounding. You cannot watch TV in New York City without a commercial coming on for lawyers trying to help you with your 9/11 related illness. So there are some very real and documented risks from these towers. Furthermore, I just want to tell you that this whole thing, and we all know it, is to help Mr. Giese with his brand new development. And if he'd like to build a brand new development, more power to him. Put the tower on the other side of his brand new development so his brand new homes can have service. We have service. This is not for us. This is for him. This is for his benefit, and this is to help his pocket. So this is not in any way, shape, or form in the interest of Yavapai Hills residents. Absolutely 100% will bring property values down. Nobody can look me in the eye and tell me it will bring property values up. So that's just my piece there. And also my husband Rory is right here and he has a few things he'd like to say.
Yes, hi, I've been, Tammy, we've spoken, well, actually, we've emailed before, and I have a background for many years in city planning, and also in the zoning. I work for the zoning board. So, I mean, one of the things, I just sent a couple of questions over. I actually thought this webinar would be more interactive. I understand and respect that you're doing a presentation only with some questions being read. My understanding is that this was not limited to an hour, 15 minutes, but it could go on for 2 hours. And we actually have many questions, several of us, and one of them I just sent over to you about neighborhood character. How will the neighborhood character not be affected by the proposed 55-foot tower? We're talking about the Yavapai homes being basically 1 story. In many elderly residents, there's a lot of concerns with it being on the water tank and issues due to when you have monsoon season, floods, fire hazards. The fire department didn't address it. We actually think fire safety, I've seen this done in New York City, fire safety assessment should be done. This location is out of context with the neighborhood character, immediate neighborhood character, and a study should have been done for neighborhood character. And an alternate site study should have been done for other alternate sites in more appropriate locations, like maybe by the Costco, maybe a commercially zoned area, as opposed to where 1,200 residents are in the Yavapai HOA. there's no way that this could be justified as being appropriate for this area. So, I mean, there's a lot of issues we actually would like to have, if this meeting is limited in time to, and it looks like it is, although we were told, Tammy, by you in an email or a phone call that it'd be, you know, at least 2 hours, we would like a second meeting, and there's no rule prohibiting it, and we never got a rule from you. I know you asked, is there a rule regarding this in the Planning and Zoning Commission? I don't believe there is, and I don't think it's the decision solely of the developer. And I also thought Dino Pergola was going to be the lead speaker today. He doesn't seem to be there. I mean, he's not there. Is he listening in at least to the two
So
presenters?
let me address some of your issues. First of all, you know, if we need to go 2 hours, we certainly can. However, typically we have discovered that at neighborhood meetings, the same questions tend to get asked and answered multiple times. So just so you're aware, you know, Dino is on. He is not feeling well, so I am handling it for him today. But he is listening on as well. So to answer
this is
that
Michelle speaking, right? Michelle?
Yes.
Meetings don't go maybe that long when it's just about neighborhood character, but we, as a small group, have actually developed at least 30 questions that we had. We were hoping to ask them of Mr. Bargola. Understand he's not well. Sorry about that. But then we would like to be able to have the opportunity for me and others to speak, not necessarily type in the questions. We understood that from Tammy that minutes is being taken. I believe that's the case, Tammy. Minutes is being taken. Is that correct?
It is being recorded.
Okay, good. So we can all see maybe the transcript. It could be, or a presentation even could be sent to us that was provided by the two presenters from Pinnacle Consulting, Michelle and Mr. Kennedy. There is the need for more time. There's no question that this is a serious issue with many different issues and comments beyond neighborhood character. So I disagree with the kind of a conclusion that most meetings of a neighborhood meeting would 1 hour, 10 minutes, whatever would suffice. I think it depends on how many people you have who want to speak. This should be a more open discussion, or a second meeting we should have a meeting where it's like almost like community board meetings in New York City, an open forum meeting. That's the best meeting where the community actually gets to put input instead of this constraint of submitting questions in advance, typing questions, limiting us in time. And I definitely think a second meeting is required.
Do you have a specific question for us?
Excuse me?
Do you have a specific question for us?
I submitted them.
That you would like us to answer, that we haven't addressed
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So one question is why, I actually said two questions already. I didn't really get answers from you. Why wasn't an alternate site study done of sites in commercial zoning districts, maybe near Costco or some other site? Why does it have to be right here on Bar Circle A Road by the Yavapai Hills, 1,200 residents? Why does it have to be there? Is there any reason?
Yes. So Steve, would you like to?
So if you look and you look at this, the coverage map that's on the screen, so the areas around where the Costco is, up to the north or out to the west, they're already being covered by the other sites. Where the need flows is the why here, why going on within this Yavapai Hills areas, because the customers that are using the site and overloading the site to the south are all within this area. So once again, we go back to, we put the site where the customers are. Customers are utilizing the sites come from this area. They're not being served well. They're not getting enough capacity. They're not being serviced properly. So the site is being placed in an area where the customers are.
Right. Mr. Kennedy, as kind of what my wife Jeanette was saying just a short time ago, Mr. Gissy, I'll just repeat it, wants this for his new development bordering on Yavapai Hills. It really is to our detriment as residents and homeowners, and it should be located on the other side of the new development. We don't want this tower in a tank, which can flood and leak. It's had problems in leaking in the past, the tank. There are several fire and other issues, fire safety issues that have not been assessed. So in terms of my questions, I actually said some of this before, Michelle, is that we are, a bunch of us are concerned about the monsoon season, the wind shear, the flooding that could occur. We don't believe that this tower is just going to just nicely topple onto itself and not damage adjacent homes or cause fires that could be a problem. I mean, as you know, even now it's a fire hazard right now in Tucson. They're having fires, not so much in Prescott maybe, but you know, we haven't seen any of the documentation. The application itself, we looked at many of the application documents, is significantly lacking and has many deficiencies. The application that was submitted by Mr. Pergola, and I'm glad he's listening, because this is, I mean, there's really no alternate
So,
site
sir,
study.
let me,
There's
I think
no-
I need,
I'm sorry, I
I
didn't
think
finish. Excuse me, I didn't finish my statement. Can I finish my statement, please? Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, so what I wanted to say is that there's no evidence, there's no map of properties within 300 feet of the proposed site together or a mailing list of property owners. There's no, the applicant, the developer is out of compliance with the setback distance between the proposed facility and nearest residential unit within 300 feet. We don't have locations owned, leased, or operated by the developer within 10 miles of the proposed site. There's no certification of police, fire departments within 5 miles of the site have been notified of the application. There's no evidence in the city encouraging co-location, and there's no list of wireless communication facilities which the proposed site has the potential to interfere with, including the name and address and phone number. That's just some of the many questions that we have, many of us, and we really desire a second interactive meeting. It's good to have a presentation webinar. Didn't know it would be solely that, and there's some new questions in writing, but I think it to be a more community-friendly meeting where input is welcomed, that there should be a second meeting. There's no rule, Tammy, that you've given to any of us that says that that's prohibited, and to say it's up to the developer, Mr. Gissy, frankly, doesn't hold water with me. That's not, there's no documentation. So unless you have something to send us a rule, or your director wants to have email contact with a bunch of us, I'd be glad to see it. But right now, we're requesting a second meeting that's interactive. You've had your meeting with the developer leading this meeting, and it shouldn't be time limited, and there is more to say, and I'm sure others that I know want to speak as well, so I like to give them the opportunity. But a second meeting is really a meeting that is not just something that you're going to say,
Okay, sir.
we don't
So,
want
okay,
it.
I can answer that. Let me,
I need
to interject here. I need to interject here. So, there is another meeting. It will be the Planning and Zoning Commission. There is no time limit. There will be a limit on how long you could speak. Be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. Right now, because of the pandemic, it will not be in person. Will be the same setup, but we'll be able to have people. You'll be able to raise your hand, and you'll be able to speak to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and that'll be the next meeting.
Sorry,
in
I don't agree. Sorry, Tammy, that is not acceptable. Excuse me, Tammy, that is not acceptable. 3 minute speaking limits is.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I had to mute you. Do you want to say something, George? So basically, in regards to the neighborhood meetings, they are not required. We recommended it to Pinnacle to be able to talk with you, present the application and the information, and that way to try to get some questions answered. But I needed to mute you because, you know, but we'll unmute you, and if you have another question, then you can ask
I
that.
have several questions, and so others want to speak too who have questions. We all worked on a bunch of questions to an interactive meeting without a 3 minute speaking limit per person. The P&Z commission meeting is not the meeting that we're looking at. We want to call out some issues before the commission meets. We have a right to ask that, and you don't have a right to refuse that. We could do a webinar. It doesn't have to be in person. We understand the pandemic. We have a pandemic all around the country. We are aware of it. But we're asking, And if you need to take this up with your director, or if she wants to speak to me, I'll certainly give you my contact information. But I don't accept that there's a P&Z commission, which is not even scheduled, which actually shouldn't be scheduled, because there's a lot of issues that have not even been responded to appropriately or fully by the two presenters. We'd like Mr. Bergola to be at the next meeting, and we like to interact with him. That's a request. That's a demand.
So I'm Mr. Pergola's boss. So if you have an issue with something that he has presented or done, I can assure you that he has followed the application process according to the jurisdiction that we are in. So, you know,
That's not correct.
as Tammy has stated, a neighborhood meeting is not required by the code. We are doing this simply because we do understand that there is concern from the neighborhood. So obviously, you know, we are doing this meeting to address those concerns. So if you are concerned with something that we have submitted, or you feel that we've done something against the code, then we are certainly, you know, happy to address that. But obviously, due to the nature of what we are all living in right now, we are doing the best that we can to address the needs of the neighborhood, as well as
The needs of the neighborhood are not to have our home values drop by 30%, or not to have this thing that's a detriment to our health and our well-being.
This is being, and yes, I understand you're Mr. Pergola's boss. That's good, and we do have questions, but I don't see any reason why we can't have an interactive meeting. I'm sure there's others who want to speak. I don't want to be the only one. My wife doesn't want to be the only one, but there are some key issues. It feels like this is like a done deal being shoved down our throat. And as homeowners with property values at stake and our health and safety at stake, you should be more, just a little more affable and just a more, you know, accommodating. And I'm speaking to all of you, Tammy, Michelle, you need to be a little friendlier and accept the community's input. There are many people listening in on this from the community, both objecting and I'm sure for it. But we have a right to speak at a webinar. We're not going to get the COVID pandemic that way, but we would like an interactive session. There's nothing unfair about that or inappropriate. What is inappropriate is that you're saying no, but you're not citing the rule of the P&Z that says that you can't have that.
Well, there's also nothing that says that we can require it, so.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
Can we speak to your director tomorrow? We want to bump this up because I don't like the way this is going. And frankly, your responses are not really responses, Tammy. You said that you would report this, that you wouldn't limit the time. All I see today is a presentation that's one-sided, where some people are getting to ask questions. I've been allowed to ask a few, but we're getting non-responses from your presenters. I mean, they're not answers. This is an issue. We don't want this tower there. Okay, there's safety concerns. There needs to be a fire department review.
There will be.
We need a second meeting, and you don't have a right to refuse that. This is on an interactive meeting, not a one-sided slideshow.
Okay. Thank
So
you.
then, therefore, the answer is you're going to consider it or take it up with your director, and I'd like to know that person's name and give me the contact information. I'll give you my number at the end of this meeting.
Okay, just email me your information and I will forward it on to our director.
We plan to take this as far up the ladder as we have to get this meeting. If you don't want it, if you're refusing right now, and everyone's listening to this, and you're refusing to have the meeting, and you're not being accommodating, then I'll send you my information.
Why
So
don't you
a lot of people will be emailing you for this.
Sir, if you have questions, we're happy to answer them.
But you're not really answering it. You're answering it from your own personal perspective because you have a personal investment. And we want to understand some of the relationships between your company and the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council and all the projects that you have before these commissions and committees to understand more about what Mr. Gissy is all about and what Mr. Bergola and you are all about. We like to understand where you have a personal interest and you wanted to say, just do this. You're not giving real responses from listening to us. If you were listening truly to me, to my wife, you would actually be more accommodating, provide a little more responsive specificity to the specific points. I'm clearly representing. I mentioned at least 4 or 5 things. My wife Jeanette has mentioned about 3 or 4 things, and your responses, frankly, yourself, are non-responsive, not helpful. We would like Mr. Pergola to be at the next meeting, and Mr. Gissy.
Mr. Pergola is at this meeting. However, I am answering the questions currently. He
Right,
is
but I
at
don't
the
want you
meeting
answering
and
the
he
questions.
is listening. He simply submitted the paperwork. So again, I believe that you had a specific question you were asking us why we didn't choose a commercial area. And I believe Mr. Kennedy did answer that specifically. You asked us, we were asked previously why this location was chosen. We explained that it's not some, plot against anybody, that Verizon, RF Engineer, due to the users in the area, have identified a need in the area. Therefore, this was the best location for the site to meet the needs of the network.
And excuse me, by the area, the needs of the area, we're talking about Mr. Giesi's new plan development and their needs, because we already have coverage.
We are talking about the current needs of the area. As Steve had stated in his presentation earlier, Verizon looks 3 years ahead. So 3 years ago was when a need was identified in this area. So,
well, I think 3 years from now, the new development Mr. Giesi is building is going to need something over on the other side of it. So why don't we just skip the 3 years and let him put it where it serves his needs for his new development and gets out of our backyards, because we do not want this. And many things you're saying as fact are in fact not factual.
Hi, this is Kaylee, one of the panelists, and we still have like 7 or 6 more attendees with their hands raised. And we do have a specific request that other folks in the neighborhood would like to speak now.
Thank you, Kaylee. So we're going to move on to the next person, which is Gail and Tremblay. Hold on. Hold on, I'm having trouble here. Why isn't it doing it? Okay, because there's people. Hold on 1 second. Okay, Gail and Tremblay, we have you on.
For some reason, they're not showing anymore with their hands raised. So maybe we can move on to Ann Reynolds.
Okay. Hi, Ann, we have you on.
I think she's still muted.
Yep.
Here we
Oh, she needs to unmute herself. There she
Okay,
is.
there we go.
Okay. You mentioned that T-Mobile might be wanting to add to this structure. Would that affect the height and the width and the safety as far as the footprint where it would collapse to? Also, I really appreciated Rory's comments, and I'm appalled at the lack of interest in the neighborhood's comments and concerns in this meeting. And I suggest that unless you hear us, anybody with Verizon carrier change to AT&T. I'm sorry, but I'm just disgusted with this meeting. But anyway, also, you mentioned that other people might be adding to this tower. Would that make it even uglier? Or how would that affect the appearance?
So it would not get taller. Currently, Verizon is locating at a 46-foot center line. So the other available center line would be below that. So they would go below Verizon's at approximately, they could go at like 36 feet.
Also, you mentioned that the existing water tower is what, 30 feet high, but yet it's down, it's lower, it's on a lower elevation than where your tower will be. So it's not like your tower is just going to be 20 feet higher, it's going to be much higher.
So we did do some photo simulations to show various angles of, you know, what it would look like. And like I said, if somebody has a specific area that they would like us to do photo simulations from, we're happy to do that, to give you, you know, a general idea of what it would look like. This is approximately 225 feet from the north, looking at it. This is from the northeast. And I'm also happy to send these to you. This is looking at it from the south.
This is an utter eyesore in the middle of my neighborhood. I'm 900 feet from this thing. I totally resent having this crammed down my throat. I didn't move to Yavapai Hill. You mentioned you're putting it here because there's already junk up there on the hill. Well, that doesn't justify making it worse. A lot worse.
So,
Okay, so we'll go on to the next. Well, Rob Rantner.
You hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's Wendy Ratner. I just want to say a comment and a two-part question. The photo really doesn't have the correct perspective of how it would look. And if you're going to do another photo, I would appreciate the correct perspective that shows that it is large and looming. Because the photo slide you showed has the tower, the water tank, and the proposed cell tower looking almost the same size. You know that is not accurate. The first part of the question that I have is, there are local cell sites. And I would like to know where I can have in my hand the study of the percentage of the capacity of each of those local sites. That's part A.
So you're asking for Verizon to generate a statistical report that shows you the capacity of each of the surrounding sites?
That is correct.
Okay, that is proprietary information that is not shared. It's a government regulation called CPNI, Customer Proprietary Network Information. We are not allowed to share that down to that granular level. What I can do is approach Verizon and ask for a percentage of capacity, but to show you all the statistical data behind that would be equivalent of you showing me everything in your checking account.
I don't actually,
Verizon doesn't do that either.
I don't agree with that analogy. And that is an extremely important statistic for all of the people living in Yavapai Hills to be educated as to exactly what is the capacity of all the cell tower sites within this location, to see if they're at the maximum capacity. Because if they are not, we certainly don't need the tower here. So that's part of question A. Question B is, let's just make believe that this site is off the table. It is not available. What is your next best site that you have researched and you would consider for this area?
Since this is the one that was the candidate, one of the candidates given, and this is what the Verizon engineer requested as the location, that's the candidate that we're working on as a design. And if it does not pass zoning, then the engineers will go back at Verizon and research the area and try to figure something out.
Well, in response to that answer, my last part of the question is, may I have the documented study of all the local sites, including this site, that shows how it was rated and what criteria was used in the rating?
I'm not sure. So essentially, Verizon identifies a need in the network, and then the RF engineer basically issues a search saying that they have a need in the network. And then, so I'm just explaining what the process is.
Okay, so I see that, but in other communities that I have spoken to people that have similar situation with a proposed cell tower, their company didn't do it initially, but after a meeting like this, they went back and had a rating of each site, such as favorable, unfavorable, neutral, poor. And they had very specific criteria that made that rating what it was. So the question is, do you have such a criteria? And if so, did you do that rating?
So I think what you're referencing is that in some jurisdictions, there are favorable, unfavorable, neutral sites that the jurisdiction has identified, not that the carrier doesn't necessarily identify that. That comes from the jurisdiction and the code. The town of Prescott's code does not have favorable, unfavorable, neutral designations. That's not how their code is written. So I don't know where the starting point you would like me to use to do something like that.
Well, I would like to be used what neighboring cities in this area in northern Arizona have used that have stricter codes that would ensure that the site selected was not selected because it is in the best interest of the business partners, but because it is in the best interest of the people that live near the site. So that's the criteria that you should be looking at. And the criteria would include what I mentioned before, the capacity of all nearby cell towers, as well as is it a residential or commercial? And there are many different things. I bet you're very familiar. And if you can give us a model of one, that would be helpful.
So when we look at a site, as we were talking about earlier, we have a very small area in which to look to meet the needs of the network. Verizon or any carrier for, that matter, they don't just build a site for fun. I mean, nobody went out here and said, oh, you know what, we really want to upset all of the neighbors in Yavapai Hills and build a site. Verizon would not be interested in this area if there wasn't a need. Cell towers are not a cheap endeavor for them to take on. To build a cell tower, it's several hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, and that's just to construct it. It's to, get from ground zero to actually having a tower. So, it's not something that is taken on lightly by Verizon or any of the carriers. They truly do look at their whole network, and not only do they have an obligation to the FCC to fill their gaps in coverage, but also to their customers to fill the gaps in coverage. So, I do understand that, this is in your neighborhood and you have concerns, about this site. And, I want to be able to answer your questions and to the best of our ability to be able to address those questions. And we can try to put together, something that addresses, why exactly this site was picked. But I do think that that the other sites in the area are at capacity and what would would happen with this site coming on air.
The question that I have is, this is Rob Ratner. Is this the first cell tower that's put in a residential lot that is 53 feet from the property line in Prescott?
I don't know the answer to that.
We would like to know that.
No, it's not. We have approved cell towers in residential areas around the city of Prescott. Higher.
Can we get a list of those, please?
We'll try to find a list or generate a list of the applications we have processed. So we need to move on to the next person. Bruce Klein, you're unmuted. You need to unmute yourself. There you are.
Hello, is this Bruce Klein? Am I live?
Yes, you are.
I'm calling from a camping site, so I apologize for possibly the quality of the audio. I have a general comment and maybe a question or two. I do live on Yavapai Hills Drive. I'm not as close to tower as many of the others on the call, and I probably would see the tower from my location, but wouldn't be as I guess as large an object as others would observe. My first comment is I do understand people's concern around the size of the structure, particularly those that are close to it. And I don't know whether it would affect their property value. It possibly might. I doubt down where I am or those other people down lower in the valley part of the neighborhood it would affect their property values at all. But I do also want to point out that I do use my cell phone, and we all use our cell phones, and we need continued capacity in order to do our jobs and to live our lives. So there is a trade-off between usefulness of the capacity of the microwave capability and the visual effect it has on the neighborhood. I don't disagree. It has some, and but I think it has to be traded off with the value of the tower itself. My specific recommendation is that the couple from New York had a lot of questions, and I think some of those questions are fair. It takes a lot of time. It took a lot of time for them to ask their questions. My recommendation would be to have those questions put forward and answered electronically and let everybody see the answers to those questions. And if someone has a technical concern to the answers to those questions, they can submit that technical concern. The opinions about whether it's cancerous or not cancerous are just opinions. I'd like to have answers that have some technical support for them versus just opinions. And let me stop there and not take up any more of your time.
Thank you.
I actually think that Mr. Klein's suggestion is fantastic. I mean, if they would like to submit their questions, we're certainly happy to address them. And then Tammy, if you'd like to post it with presentation or with this, we're certainly happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. Rob Ratner. Oh, sorry, you already talked. Oh, here we go. Robert Halleck. Unmute yourself.
Yes, okay, thank you.
There you are.
Thank you. I have a suggestion which I hope might help. It's related to the previous suggestion just made. It suggested the following. If questions could be submitted and answered in writing, that would be fine. But I don't see the reason why we can't have then a subsequent second meeting where we can have a nice give and take. It's in the spirit of the cooperative, friendly nature of the neighborhood to have such open communication. And I don't see any reason why a second meeting wouldn't be a desirable thing. The fact that there's no requirement for such a meeting seems to me is irrelevant. What's relevant is what in fact will allow people the maximum participation. And a second meeting could do precisely that. Whether some questions come in advance and get answers in writing in advance, that might stimulate other questions. It might resolve a number of issues. But a second meeting, it seems to me, with some education in advance of it, would be a good thing. Why not? It's not a big deal to have an internet meeting like this, and folks can express their opinions. In terms of the question about health being opinion, there is a very serious study done in Brazil, 10-year study of health. It's published in the open literature. I could provide that reference. I did, in fact, mail it in the first place. And that's worthy of study. Whether someone can technically show why it's not relevant would be very helpful, or why it is relevant. But I think a second meeting would be very, very useful, and it would go in some sense toward providing a little bit of confidence that everyone has been considered and all of the questions have been answered. Some folks will object to the tower no matter what. Fair enough, it's their right to do that. Some folks may be convinced that it's okay. It may be that in the end, Verizon will decide that the community is so against this that it's not in their public relations best interest to park it here. So be that too. But anyway, I think a second meeting would be very, very useful, and I hope that in fact folks can agree to do that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hallock.
Thank you.
We have Rich Steigelman, who's been waiting to talk.
Yes, Rick Steigelman, just unmute yourself. There you go.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to me and let me ask a few questions. I would just like to go on record as being the homeowner in the pictures of the said proposed tower. The pictures do not depict the impact that tower is going to have on my home. I bought a home in Yavapai Hills because it was peaceful. We paid, all the homeowners in the area paid lots of money so utilities would be buried and not have to see them. And since moving there, we've had multiple poles added to that back area of our home. We're not happy with that. I know this is not an area for us to rant and rave, so I'm going to stop there. My questions would be, you say that Verizon is the provider that is proposing this tower, but is it not a private entity that is proposing this tower?
Right. So you're correct. It's Verizon. Verizon is who is locating on the tower. Sun State Towers is who is building this tower.
So this is really a business venture of a company that makes money by putting up cell towers, a business service for cellular providers.
Correct. Sun State Towers builds sites that Verizon or other carriers can go on. And Verizon indicated a need in this area and reached out to Sun State. You know, as we were talking about earlier, it is extremely expensive to build towers and to maintain them. You know, one of the things that I'm sure that you've heard about in the news, or you know, you've read about or you're concerned about, is the maintenance of this. And obviously, if this tower got built behind you, you would want it to be maintained to the highest standard. One of the things, unfortunately, over the years that the carriers have discovered is that they're not really good at maintaining the standards of a tower and building out networks. So in order to essentially satisfy the maintenance side of things, there are companies like Crown Castle, or SBA or ATC or Sun State Towers or other companies of that nature that they do build the sites and they maintain them. And that is basically their primary goal. And Verizon's primary is to make sure that, you know, the antennas and everything of that nature are operating up to all of the federal guidelines. So in that way, everybody is being served to the best of their ability.
Okay. And then I would also like to second or third the previous gentleman's comments about an additional meeting. I think there are hundreds of people in opposition of this tower. And I think that we need to allow them to speak, and I think we need to allow them to have their questions answered. It is a neighborhood. It is people's homes. It is in people's backyards. It is in their view corridor. And we have the right to peaceful living. And people talk about studies done on people's health and studies done on cell towers and people's health. And I think that this goes even further than that. And people's health, whether it is in fact a health issue or not, if they have an opinion that it is, it truly affects their health, whether it is or not. And I would question any of you to go to any of your family, any of your friends, any of your neighbors, and ask them if a cell tower in their backyard was a good idea. And I'll guarantee you none of them are going to say yes. I think that that is very important for a neighborhood location cell tower. And it's not only for health reasons, it's for peaceful living, it's for property values, etc.
Absolutely. And, you know, I do respect your opinion, but the towers are, you know, put in neighborhoods. I have one at the elementary school that's, you know, 100 feet from my house. I have a child, you know, I guess I can truly say that I honestly do not believe that they are detrimental to your health, but I do understand where you're coming from. So, you know, if having another meeting where we don't do a presentation and all we do is take questions is something, you know, Tammy, if that's something that, you know, the town of Prescott wants us to consider or would like to also be a participant of, you know, we're certainly willing to do that. You know, obviously we had a lot of questions prior to the meeting, so we wanted to try to address those. But if people would rather just ask questions and not have a presentation, we certainly are, you know, open to that.
And I think it should be considered that, you know, the tower, if you are the provider on the third rung down, their service is going to be shooting right into my bedroom window, and workers are going to be up there working and looking into my bedroom and bonus room windows. And the neighbor here where you see the pine tree just below the proposed 50-foot tower sign is yet to build his dream home that he's been saving his life for. And are you going to, you know, there's going to be cars parked here. You guys are taking down these trees that you're saying are going to fit into the natural, but you're taking those down to create a parking pad and these cementous walls and all these commercial looking applications that just do not fit in a residential area.
Okay. Thank you. No. Okay, let's see. I think Mr. Dory already spoke, but we will put you on again. Mr. Dory, do you have anything else you want to add? You just need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Yes, I do. Earlier on, you had indicated that you had done or completed a dog and pony show with the homeowners association. What was their response? Because they've not communicated anything to the ownership, and why would they even consider allowing this to be installed, where they're more concerned with the architectural integrity of the association, and yet here all of a sudden we get a commercial structure slapped right in everybody's backyard. So what was their response to your presentation?
So they were not opposed to it. They had some concerns that were addressed during the meeting, but by the end of the meeting, they were not opposed to it. You know, they did request that it would be a stealth facility, which is why we did end up with the mono-L.
So the homeowners association simply gave you a round of applause and said that's fine?
No, they did have a meeting, and you know, we met with the board and the president and the board, and you know, there was discussion. Obviously, with discussion like this, you know, there was discussion on health benefit, on health, whether it was detrimental to health, to property values, and you know, we presented to them the same type of information that we are presenting here.
So as far as the association is concerned, this is a foregone conclusion.
I don't think anything is a foregone conclusion, as we haven't gone through the entire process yet. The neighborhood meeting and reaching out to the neighborhood is the first step in this process.
So the final decision with this lies with the city of Prescott, correct?
That is correct.
So
Yes, this will go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, who's the recommending body. That's part of the public hearing process for the SUP. And then it'll be ultimately heard by the city council, who is the decision body to approve or deny the request.
So if the homeowners press the homeowners association on this, and the homeowners association says, no, we do not want this in our association, what is the city's stance on that?
It will be taken into consideration as part of the public hearing process by the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So I do not see anybody else who has their hand raised right now. Is there anyone else who would like to speak who has not been able to? And also with the remaining questions that are on the board, what we'll do is we can print these out and run a report, and we'll get them over to Pinnacle and should try to get some of them answered. And we can try to send it out to everybody or have it available. We are going to try to get this recording on our city website for people to view again, and for anyone who was not able to watch it to be able to view. Probably maybe next week we're going to work with our IT, and then all the questions, we'll make sure they're all getting answered, and we will post that also on our city website.
Hey, Tammy.
Yes.
I know, it's 5 till, but I have Patrick O'Day, who asked a bunch of questions in the Q&A earlier, and he has now raised his hand.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, are you able to speak?
Hold on, I think he needs to unmute himself. Actually, he doesn't have his hand up. Oh, wait. Sorry, I got it now. There you go. Patrick?
This is Rich Steigelman. I think you clicked on me accidentally. I was just going to ask if we can submit new questions.
Yes, and I will put them all together and get them over, and we will add those to the list of questions.
But when do those need to be submitted by?
Hello?
When do the
Probably,
new questions?
I would get them to us by next week, or early next week, and then we can get them over to Pinnacle, and then we
you hear me?
can,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Tammy,
Rick?
at any time, if somebody wants to reach out to me directly, you can certainly give them my information. I'm happy to answer. I mean, if it's not something that they want if it doesn't have to be on your public forum, we're always happy to answer questions.
Thank you. Patrick O'Day, we have you. Patrick?
Huh. It shows his audio is working, but.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Pat.
Yes?
Am I still muted?
No, you're good. We can hear you. Patrick, you're unmuted. Okay, we'll try again in a minute.
We have Lou Carroll with his hand raised.
Thank you, Kaylee. Lou Carroll?
Yes, I'm here. It's a
Yes.
female. All right.
Okay.
I'm
Thank
wondering, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm wondering if you see such great need for this, why not enhance or beef up the existing structures that are working now?
So when you say beef up, do you mean like add additional channels to those sites?
Well, whatever is necessary to make them more productive.
Okay, so those sites are all maxed out with all the radio channels that have been purchased by Verizon from the FCC. So they're at max capacity based on the existing all the frequency bands that are available. So it's kind of like trying to see over the hill in some cases with the areas to the
Can
north.
you hear me now?
They're not able to see over the hill, just like you can't see over the hill when you're looking. And then they're maximized with capacity because they have all their channel allocations built.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead and talk, honey. Hanson.
Okay, I think Patrick's on now.
Okay, go ahead and talk.
Is the moderator of this thing going to allow me to speak?
Yes, you're on.
I can't hear her.
Can you hear me? I don't think he can hear us.
But there. Okay, we'll try again in a sec. Is there anyone else? Lou Carroll, you spoke already, correct? Oh yeah, you just spoke.
Yes.
Okay.
Could you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I can't hear you on my computer, but I can hear you on my wife's. I just had a few questions. What's the beam width of the RF signal, and will it be enveloping our houses? If so, what levels and at what distances?
So you're asking what the horizontal beam width of the antennas are about 65 degrees. That's typical for a more rural area. The vertical beam width of those antennas is about 12 degrees. So I'm not sure exactly know where your house is relative to the propagation model. I'd have to get an address from you, and then I could look and see exactly what RF levels would be at your house.
That would be phenomenal. My address is 3570 Bar Circle A.
Okay, if you'll send the question in to Tammy, noting that you're the one that needed to know the RF level at your house, I will respond with that once it gets plugged into the propagation model.
Thank you.
Yes,
There's
sir.
a tower located in the, it's west of Chino Valley on a big, huge bluff, and it sits all by itself. It looks like one of these elm type towers. Is that your tower as well?
Sir, I think that's AT&T's site.
Do you know how tall it is? Because it's huge.
No, sir, I don't. I don't know the specifics of that site.
Okay.
If you would like, we can, I don't know if there's any elms. I actually don't think there are any elms in the town of Prescott. But if you would like, I can see if we can find a 50-foot site in Prescott that you can go look at.
That would be very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, please note that on your
Oh,
question.
any other questions?
I think that's it.
Thank you. And then we have Robert Halleck.
Okay. I just have a quick follow-up to the question just asked. I think it would provide a lot of confidence to a lot of people if what could be done is to draw a contour map of the area, say within 1,500 feet of the proposed tower site, that shows the surface level RF intensity that could be found. It would be trivial for a company to create such a contour map based on the simulation models they have. And everybody in the neighborhood could see what the intensity level might be at the location of their house. And everybody could be served by the same kind of response that was given to the single individual. Can that be done?
Yeah, so you're asking like for just a 10 dB band and show what each band does as it propagates out from the site?
Yeah, I think it's kind of looking for a contour map of intensity at surface level within 1,500 feet of the tower, and that'd be pretty straightforward for simulation to do.
Can be done.
Thank you, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So we have no more questions. So nobody else wants to speak. We want to thank everybody for participating. And I think you guys just keep sending questions in, and we will be forwarding them on to Pinnacle. And we will be gathering all the questions and answers and getting onto the city website for everyone to see. Give us probably a week and a half. And then we'll also work with Pinnacle on possibly scheduling another meeting, and we'll send that information out again. But we want to thank everyone for participating, and thank you for participating in this meeting. We understand it's a difficult times, and sometimes it's better to have in person, but with these times, we hope this worked out very well, and we want to thank everyone for participating. Do you have anything to close, Michelle?
I just want to thank everybody, and you know, we can chat tomorrow, Tammy.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and so I will end this meeting. Thank you.